background. I'm not going to be offended by you eating pretzels in the background. Hey everyone, it's Becky here from the Beckisphere, and welcome back to my channel. My throat's dying for some reason. We're good now. If you're new here, hi, my name is Becky, and every Monday and Thursday we talk about the climate here. The problems, yes, but the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, hit the like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And if it's your first time, welcome, because we are having our weekly climate book club meeting. Yay! If you hear a human in the background that I am talking to, if I'm not talking to it, then that's not who I'm referring to. Okay, Becky, stop talking. So the person I am talking to throughout the night, besides you lovely people, is my mom, Sandy. So say hi, Sandy. Hi, Sandy. That's a dad joke. It's a parent joke. Okay. Well, anyways, so we're going to go ahead and get started on chapters 3 and 4 of Climate Courage by Andreas Karelas. If you have not checked out this book yet, please do. I insanely highly recommend it because it is a good read. Published 2020, so it's relevant. And so today we are going to talk about chapters 3 and 4 because that's what the schedule said. So let me go back to chapter 3 because I've been reading. All right. Okay. So chapter 3 is called Climate Confusion. And the quote, because there's a quote in the beginning of every chapter, and I like the quote, so I'm going to read it, is "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right," by Henry Ford. Okay, so this chapter talks a lot about how just because it's kind of originally seen as a more Democrat problem, the climate, doesn't mean that it was throughout history. So he goes through and talks about a lot of Republican leadership in politics that were very strong on environmental movements in the past. So he talks about how in 1988, NASA scientist James Hansen famously testified before Congress about the dangers of global warming. This is on page 31, by the way. And after he did that, George H.W. Bush, who ended up running for president that year, was on the had heard about that, and he responded saying that sounds pressing, and those who think we are powerless to do anything about the greenhouse effect forgets about the White House effect, which is a cool quote. It's a very cool quote. I feel like people should use that quote more. But anyways, so that's an example of where Bush was really pushing on the climate. And in addition to that, he also in 1992 went to Rio de Janeiro and for the Earth Summit, and eventually signed into effect the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So that's a very big environmental move that was done by a Republican president, George H.W. Bush. Yep, I got that right.
Herbert Walker. How
do you know that? Oh yeah, you were alive during that time. I don't know. Was I? Wait, was I? No, I don't think I was. Okay, so, and then another example is Republican President Teddy Roosevelt. And he was very known for being an outdoors person. Actually, fun fact, a teddy bear is called a teddy bear because of Theodore Roosevelt. So, fun factoid, because I don't know if it was because he killed a bear or because...
I was going to say, he liked to hunt.
He liked to hunt. So, it might have been because he killed a bear and then that turned into a child's
stuffy.
Have to look
that up.
It sounds wrong, but also it sounds right. That sounds about right. Anyway, so Teddy Roosevelt was a very outdoors man, and he established the U.S. Forest Service and the first federal bird reserve. And he also like started up a bunch of like the national wildlife refuges and national parks and stuff. So he was very big on like the outdoors thing. And then in 1962, Rachel Carson, who is bae. If you know me, you know I love Rachel Carson. She's awesome because she was the first person that I knew that was famous that both loved the ocean and liked to write. And so that's how I got into her. Because me. But anyways, so Rachel Carson, who published Silent Spring, if you might know that because it really started the movement towards banning pesticides, which we still have a lot of work to do. I don't think Rachel will be very pleased where we are on 2020 for that. But it basically documented the devastating impacts of pesticides and industrial toxins on the natural environment, hence Silent Spring, because all the birds died. So then after that, there was more people that wanted environmental justice, and Republican President Richard Nixon responded by establishing the National Environmental Policy Act, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. So,
That
I mean,
shocked me because
that
those
shocked
are
me too.
huge.
Those are huge things. And like, I don't know, for some reason, there's other things that make me that I think of when I think of Richard Nixon. And that was not the environmental stuff. So in a way, I feel like history kind of overwrote itself with the other things that happened in Nixon's presidency. And unfortunately, that made it less. Hi, Nando. He says, if I remember correctly, teddy bears were named after Theodore Roosevelt as a bit of a jab at him since he hunted bears and supposedly hated being referred to as Teddy or something like that. I may be way off the mark. I could totally see that. I mean, that sounds, it's something having to do with him hunting bears for sure. I don't know whether or not it's like, but yeah, that makes sense. That would be kind of funny. Because then everybody was hugging the bears instead of killing them. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so Richard Nixon, his administration was super big on environmental stuff, or at least a lot of environmental stuff got done in his presidency, and he is quite a famous Republican president. So yeah, that's a big thing right there. And then in a speech to European leaders in June of 2001, President Bush laid out his thoughts on the matter of climate change, and you got to get the book to read it or just look it up, I guess. But he's very well versed on the issue for 2001. Very versed on the issue. I was quite impressed by how specifically he went into the scientific details on the issue in his speech of how important climate is to solve. So that really shows a very strong feeling towards the climate at that point. And then so that happened. And the next Republican because he's basically going down the line being like, this Republican president did this Republican president did this. And I mean, honestly, it makes sense, okay? Because how many Republican presidents have we had versus Democrat? We've had more Republican presidents, I'm pretty sure, by a decent amount. And so if Republican presidents never did anything about the environment, then probably nothing would have gotten done in this country. So
I'll have to go back and look that up.
For some reason, I remember
like it's a pendulum swing going back and forth.
Yeah, okay, maybe just ignore me. Let's just move on.
But I don't know.
I don't know where I got that from. I need to think about that. Anyways, so yeah, so Senator John McCain, who ran against Barack Obama, was actually like very big on environmental stuff. He was the chair of the Senate Committee for Commerce, Science, and Transportation. And so he was very like chatty about climate change and talking about that, all the way, 2008, which I don't really remember that, to be perfectly honest, but I was too young. So I blame you. I don't know. I was too young. But yeah, so he was very vocal about that. And then Mitt Romney, who ran against Obama in 2012, he was also very had a long history of climate action in his state of Massachusetts. And what's interesting is that yet, even though both Obama and Romney really, that could have been a very clear, this is an important issue, both those candidates cared about that topic. And yet, during the convention, I found this fascinating. During the convention, climate change was not brought up. During the presidential debates, it was not brought up, which is, I think that should be a statement on maybe media organizations, because they're the ones that lead. Yeah, but Republican organization or media organizations are the ones that lead the debates, and they didn't put that in the question. I just think that's interesting. So, anyways, I'm a journalist. I'm not just attacking media for no reason. Analyzing as a journalist. Anyways, okay. So, yeah. So, Romney, also a big climate person, but because there was not much talk about it. And then afterwards, as we're going to talk about more, there's a lot of money from the oil and gas and fossil fuel companies in the Republican support. Yeah, in the Republican funding.
What page you on?
I'm on page 35. Yeah. So there was a lot of like money for that. And so after Mitt Romney lost and his party really swung towards climate denial or just like ignoring it, then he also did too. But now back in 2019, now that, the Republican Party's been struggling, right? So he kind of broke ranks on the topic of climate change and has started talking again about how it's a really important issue. And I feel like that's a really good sign that, the issue is slowly becoming bipartisan. So that's really good. But again, there were so many Republican presidents early, like not that early on, that were super passionate about the environment and climate. So it's not really supposed to just be a liberal issue. And we'll go into why that ended up being the case, though, later on. But yeah, so then after, then came the whole Obama presidency, and basically that whole issue of Obama getting blocked on doing anything for 6 years definitely seemed to cement some party lines on certain important issues, because every time Obama tried to pass something, it would get knocked down, regardless of whether or not individuals actually supported it. So, yeah. So that happened. I'm going to keep moving on because I'm already losing my voice and it's only 13 minutes in. Dear Lord. Okay. And there's even a part in here, a little tease for getting a book. There's even part in here that talks about how Donald Trump and his and 3 of his children signed a document saying, yes, climate change is a very important issue. And they signed that as prominent business people amongst a bunch of business leaders to the Obama presidency in 2009.
Wow.
Like, I mean, did he read it? I don't know, but I would imagine at least one of the Trumps read it.
If we fail to act now, it is scientifically irrefutable that there will be a catastrophic and irreversible consequence for humanity and our planet.
That's what he signed. Yeah, doesn't sound like it nowadays, huh? So it's been very swingy back and forth, really depending, it seems, on where income comes in. So that then moves on to the next thing, which is, however, the degree to which Trump believes it's a problem is based not on science, but whether it is negatively and whether it will negatively impact business. And that is a very common argument amongst the more conservative side, is that renewable energy will not support business and the business sector and the economy. And that's not true. And we will go over that. So this argument is equivalent to not believing a doctor who says you have a broken arm if it means that you have to wear a cast all summer. Like, yeah. So people will choose not to believe climate change if they think there's no way to solve it. And that is a main point that he's going to go over a lot in these chapters, is talking about how the main reason people say they deny climate change is more just because they don't feel like they can do anything to solve it. So denial is a form of avoidance. So that it makes sense, you know? Mm-hmm. It's a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to move on to empowerment. Yay! So those were all the history and stuff. And this is empowerment. And I love this section. So in this, Karelas says that climate change is the biggest threat humanity has ever faced, and one that threatens all life on our planet. I don't know why I had trouble reading that. I just want to re-say that again. It's a big ass problem. Anyways, okay. So basically he talks about how it really comes up to efficacy. People need to know that they are capable of action and that the solutions they take will actually make a difference. They are personally connected and able to impact why am I starting with words? Impact the result of the problem. Mm-hmm. I think I made sense. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, an individual sense of personal empowerment predicted in a study whether they believed in climate change science at all. So if someone did not think that they were able to do anything about it, then they were much more likely to say they didn't even believe in the science. Interesting, because here we are as climate communicators saying, oh, they just must not understand, you know, and so we're talking about the science and stuff. But in a lot of cases, it's actually just people being like, hey, I don't think I can do anything about it, so I'm just going to pretend like it's not an issue, you know? Yeah, they're plugging their ears. They're just, you know, not going to pay attention. They're just moving on because it doesn't seem like something that they can solve. So yeah, explaining the science is important, but it might be more important to just talk about what you can do, empowering, which is a good argument for those people that are doing like zero waste stuff on YouTube. That's interesting. Anyways, but yeah, so one of the main values as a Republican is to have small government, right? And so if they get the message all the time, and I'm a huge person at fault for this, honestly. If they constantly are getting the impression that the only way to stop climate change is through big government, then they're going to be very likely to reject the science too. So again, being Republican means that you want little government intervention. You care more of the state by state legislation, communities, less overhauling government. That's the basis of conservatism. And so people who therefore don't want a lot of government overhaul, hearing environmentalists constantly talk about something like the big Green New Deal and big government overhaul, makes them not want to even believe that the issue is a problem. Dang. So it matters more that we need to take it from a different approach, an approach that is often ignored, and that's the community level. So that is, sorry, my laptop's dying. Hold up. I have the cord here though, so we good. We Gucci. How y'all doing? Is anyone still there? I see there's 3 people in the chat. Doing good? Not getting anything. Okay, we're going to keep going. It's fine. People sometimes watch it out. Some days it's busier than others. Okay, so yeah, so we need to focus on the community level. We need and I'm going to do videos on this later too. Rahul says, hi, doing good. Hi, Rahul. My faithful guys. So yeah, this is awesome. Nando says doing good. Thank you. Hi. Okay, so we're gonna keep going then. Okay, so yeah, so it's important to focus on the community level instead. And I think that is something that is constantly forgotten by a lot of people, including me, you know? And I was debating between whether or not I should either just get a composting thing for myself or whether or not I should start a composting project within my apartment unit. And I think that just answered my question.
Interesting.
Community based. Because that's the thing, is that we as environmental folk are constantly going, like being concerned that we don't want to scare people off by approaching them about being a part of the different solutions out there. And I think that it's important to do both, as you're saying, Rahul, to do everything, to do individual action, but also do the bigger community action. And yes, I would love to do both, but it just matters on whether or not I'm taking the compost bin to the farmer's market and figuring out that method versus having a compost thing on site potentially. Because there's a lot of property there. I feel like there's definitely a place for a communal composting. Anyways, we're getting out of hand here. Don't worry. Videos will come on that. Mom, yes.
But his big thesis statement is right here. These local actions have the best chance to change the conversation around climate change in America.
Yes.
That is the book.
That is the book. That is the takeaway of this whole book, is that it's community-based action.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's something that a lot of environmentalists get, because they're either thinking individual action or voting. It's either get rid of your own impact or vote. And those are the only things. But impacting community makes a difference. And obviously right now during COVID time, don't impact your community right now. Just stay safe. But we'll get to it. Okay, so along these lines, there's very solid evidence that clean energy sources are good for national security, which is a critical issue. Now, this is something I also found fascinating because I didn't think about it. Well, okay, so I thought about it from the perspective of that it's good for to make the environment be good for national security in that regard, because it would help the economy, the health of communities, and also the environment. But the part that I was thinking of, and maybe this is not the right part. No, it's not. Well, shoot. I'm going to spoil it anyways. I think it's on chapter 4. But the part that I was thinking of is that there was a case where some domestic terrorists were trying to get rid of a main part of the centralized grid, because we have such a centralized grid with our current electric system. And I'm definitely doing a video on this because I find it fascinating. I'm saying that way too much. Anyways, is anyone keeping track? Someone? Nando, Rahul? Take notes. But no, it's okay. I have a notepad. It basically, because our energy grid right now is so centralized, it only takes a very small militia to knock the whole thing out, because it's like a circuit. If you take out part of the circuit, then it disconnects a bunch, right? We've seen in the movies how one tiny little explosion puts out the whole power grid, right? And that's a big national security issue. And so we need to, from a national security perspective, it makes sense to go towards clean energy because it can be more community and individual based. So anyways, that is going to come later. Well, I already said it, so there you go. Okay, but yeah, so hold on, sorry. Okay, so there was, oh yeah, that's what it was. There was a report by the Trump. Rahul says, yes, I liked the decentralization of power grid too. Definitely relates back to the earlier chapter. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that was chapter 4. Yes. What? No, it was talked about in chapter 4. It was the early chapter, which is what this chapter. Okay. So in 2018, the Trump White House, I remember this, released Volume 2 of the 4th National Climate Assessment, in which the federal government is required to publish every 4 years. And it was literally like the Pentagon and big parts of the government being like, yo, we're screwed if we don't do something. And Trump basically, like, when it was talked about how devastating the impact of climate change is going to be on the economy, Trump was like, I don't believe in climate change. Yeah, that whole thing that my whole administration put together, I don't believe it. Anyways, but here's some good news. This is also a super big part. Prepare. There is a quote from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Quote, I do believe in human-caused climate change. The question is about how do you address it. The way to do this consistent with American values and American capitalism is through technology and innovation. We can get Mitch on board if we need to. I mean, we might not need to. We'll see. But anyways, so it's so that's really cool. Like, I mean, obviously, one could argue that we can throw certain people's words back in their faces several years later, and for some reason, it doesn't make any difference.
It doesn't make any difference.
So, with that in mind, grain of salt, but interesting. And he showed other examples of that from Senator Lindsey Graham, former House Speaker John Boehner. Really? That's how you pronounce that?
Yes.
Okay. Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich and former Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
I think he's doing better with his COVID, by the way.
Oh, he's doing better.
Yeah, I think he's out of the hospital.
Good. Yeah. That's good. Okay. Money and politics. Now we're getting to the dirt. And I already did talk about this to some extent. Well, okay, so I talked about the second part of it. Okay. So in this part, he starts off talking about how a friend who works in Washington, D.C. explains basically how there's money in politics. And she does it in a way that's very succinct. And so I want to go ahead and just like share it. She explained how the lobbyists will walk into the politician's office and clearly lay out the issues that they care about. Then they say, look, I got a whole bunch of money that I plan to use this campaign season. I can use it to support you in your campaign, or I can use it to support your opponent. Which is an argument to take money out of politics. But anyways, that's basically the gist of how the fossil fuel industry started taking over the ideals on this topic for the Republican Party, because the Republican Party was like, don't give the Democrats money. But fun fact, they did anyways. So let me go into some of the deets on that. Okay, so the first part that he talks about is the oil and gas industry alone contribute to over $80 million during the 2018 elections, with 87% going to Republican candidates and Republican Party. That's a high percent of that. But it's not all of it. But just wait. In 2016, they contributed over $100 million to the presidential election. Electric utilities spent over $50 million in these same two elections, and over 62% of it went to Republicans. Coal mining industry spent over $20 million during the same time frame, and over 94% of which went to Republicans. Rahul says, I like how direct and clear Karelas' writing was and how real and scary this is. And apparently this is how the lobbying works for big corporations. Yeah. Which then when we get into chapter 4, we'll talk about then, the whole argument against big corporations and how that goes into the argument for climate change, right? So that's cool. I mean, it seems a little confusing because it does seem like big corporations are funded by both parties too. So, yeah. Or not funded, but like voted because of the money. And it's just, we need to take money out of politics. I get it. Okay. So, so in the 2016 elections, I found this funny, the most funded politician for the fossil fuel companies was Ted Cruz, which I just found funny. And then after that, it was Donald Trump, and then it was Hillary Clinton, because they both received a ton of money from the fossil fuel industries because they're not taking any chances. And it's buying off both sides to ensure that the scourge of climate policy won't affect their businesses. So yeah, even though a environmentally conscious administration has now entered the office, this is still a concern for sure. And we need to talk about the whole taking money out of politics to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. And the thing is that this isn't the first time this thing has happened, because the fossil fuel industries, as I explained in my video, definitely check it out. If you're not watching this live, then I will probably have a little thing that shows up right there. But yeah, they hired the same consultants. The fossil fuel companies hired the same consultants to help create the misinformation campaigns as the same people that work for big tobacco. So the fact that there's such a parallel between two big problems, not a coincidence, kind of crazy. That's why a while ago when I did that video, literally I put conspiracy over it because it sounds like such a big conspiracy, but it's true. It's just goodness. I like believing that everyone's good on the inside, but some stories like this, my goodness. Anyways, and that's actually something that he talks about later. Sorry, I'm jumping around so much, but there's a lot of connections between chapters 3 and 4. Oh no, this was chapter 3. It's just the end of chapter 3. I'm skipping to page 46 where he says, as I write this, I think about all the executives who have known that their products would cause climate havoc and proceed to pursue their line of business regardless, lying to the public and buying politicians to protect their profit margins. I can't help but wonder, when they play with their children and grandchildren, don't they ever ask themselves, what kind of world am I leaving them? I can only presume that when you're one of many staff at a big corporation, perhaps peer pressure influences your behavior. Perhaps they even feel like they have no agency. If no one else is saying anything, I probably shouldn't either. Or maybe they're just fixated on making money that they've gotten used to ignoring it. I don't really know. And I feel that real hard in the soul. Yeah. Because it's just how are you okay with just letting this continue for so long without feeling the need to do anything about it? When you're playing with your kids and grandkids, it's just and it's one thing if you didn't know, but if so yeah, that part hit the feels. But if you want to hear more about this whole thing, then I recommend checking out my video. And Rahul says, bad ancestors. Boo. Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
I gotta move on. Anyways, okay, so yeah, you read this because it's, I gotta do summary, right? Gotta keep moving. Okay, so now we're on to how the media organizations have screwed shit up. Also because of money, right? So, okay. So Heartland Institute launched a billboard campaign in 2012 to compare believers in global warming to murderers and madmen, such as the Unabomber, Charles Manson, and Osama bin Laden. That's mean. I will say that I still argue that Thanos was really an environmentalist, but like gone wrong. And I think there's a lot of examples of that, of environmentalists who have then taken the route of just getting rid of a population of people to fix the problem, which is not the right way to fix the problem, but that's what they do. And it's just like, damn. Anyways, okay. So, and yeah, okay. So in addition, a March 2019 study revealed that 62% of Americans who don't watch Fox News agree that climate change is largely caused by human activity, compared to only 12% of Fox News viewers. Y'all, we need to fix that. Like, legit. Okay, it's one thing for us to just be like, oh, whatever, it's Fox News, everybody knows it's propagandist. No, people don't know that. People consider it a legitimate news source. And if they are going to keep surviving, which compared to now the alternatives of even more conspiratorial media on the Republican side, suddenly Fox News needs to win out of those, unless another thing comes up that is more reasonable. But seriously, like, a lot of conservative people watch Fox News, and that is just a fact. And because of that, they are disseminating climate denial and uneven opinions on the climate topic. And it's just like, what is happening? We need to infiltrate that. That needs to stop. Like, seriously, Fox News, dudes, my dudes. Sorry, journalist rant. I'll probably do a video. Okay, Nando, Godzilla, King of the Monsters had a villain who was an eco-terrorist. Clearly, writers think the idea is compelling. Right? I swear that's a pretty common genre. It's just like, shoot. It's like the same genre that female journalists are just going to sleep around to get the story. That's also a thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. I don't know if we're going to get through all this. Thank you for sticking with me, guys. Okay. But it's not just Fox News. The same report in 2013 that found that Fox News coverage of a report gave 69% of airtime to climate doubters and only 31% of airtime to those in agreement with the vast majority of scientists and their findings. Not good. But Bloomberg and the Los Angeles Times were also found guilty of giving climate deniers more time and space than they were due to. Bloomberg! Y'all, Bloomberg almost was like running for president for the Democrat side, and he was a huge climate change enthusiast. Put your money where your mouth is, man. I am just very passionate tonight. I don't know. Sorry. Okay. But so they're doing hopefully not as bad, right? That was in 2013. Well, in March 2019, when massive floods hit the Midwest, ABC, CBS, and NBC completely failed to mention climate change. Now, if you turn the page, back to page 48, I think this is an important thing to notice, is other stations appropriately pointed out that the National Climate Assessment and other scientific sources suggest that these are the exact types of dramatic events caused by climate change. So we can't even claim that the scientists were being indecisive on this one. And that's a usual argument, frankly, I use, is that, well, scientists are acting like it's not as certain as it is. They are now. We need to catch up as a media source because it's a thing. And that is the end of chapter 3. Okay, chapter 4. Conservatives forging a path. He's really digging home that has always been really a bipartisan thing, and we need to just get back to that mentality, right? So the quote in this one is, Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. Was he a Republican? Abraham Lincoln?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'll Google it. You keep going.
You don't need to Google it. He's too old to be relevant.
You've got 20 minutes.
Okay. So this, I'm just going to read the first sentence of this chapter because it makes me happy. I've got some good news, and I've got some great news. I'll start with the good news. When do you ever hear that in a climate change-based book? I got some good news, and I got some great news. Never. You never hear that. You always get, I got bad news, I got some worse news. Anyways. Okay. He goes mostly into a lot of statistics, so prepare your statistical brains because I like the statistics too. So 72% of Americans think global warming is happening, and that has increased in 10 points since 2015.
Great.
That was in a 2019 survey. Very good. Only 12%, which is higher than the 7% that the other book said, but maybe he was talking about England. Like, I'm second guessing myself. Anyways, 12% of Americans think global warming is not happening. Very small. Americans who think global warming is happening outnumbers those who don't think it's happening by a 6-to-1 ratio. It's like, why are we even discussing the other side? I'm sorry, but just why? Okay, 59% of Americans understand that global warming is mostly human caused. Good. Now, here's the one that's kind of sad. 22% of Americans understand that there's a strong consensus among scientists. That is a failure. That is a failure from the media. That is a failure from the science community. That's not good. Like, okay, it's probably also money from fossil fuel companies too, but goodness gracious, 22% of people think that it's a consensus. That's not acceptable for this time. I don't know why I'm like ranting at you guys. You guys are here. You're awesome. You're great. I'm sorry, but you know. Okay. That's why I have these book clubs, so I could just rant for an hour. Anyways. And I want your conversation. Sorry, that's a bad thing to say. Okay. So another one is 67% say that the issue of global warming is either extremely, very, or somewhat important to them personally. 67%. People are getting the idea that this is a problem that they need to care about. And 64% of people think that global warming is affecting the weather in the US. So, yeah. They're understanding that those floods, the snowstorm that's happening right now, the hurricanes, the wildfires, they didn't used to happen. Other findings from a 2019 survey found that 95% of liberal Democrats, 89% of moderate and conservative Democrats, and 66%, see how it kind of goes down, 66% of liberal and moderate Republicans and 44% of conservative Republicans think that global warming is happening. Okay, so we got from the most liberal side, we got 95, 89, 66, 41. We're seeing some disparity here. The majority of registered voters, though, 59%, think global warming is caused by human actions. Not high enough for my liking, but it's the majority. And 94% of liberal Democrats compared to only 26% of conservative Republicans, but 53% of liberal and moderate Republicans believe that or are worried about global warming. So a lot of Democrats are worried, very little conservative Republicans are worried, but over half of moderate Republicans and 88% of moderate Democrats think that it's a bad problem that we need to work on. Heavy stats. Oof. Yeah, I know. I like statistics. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll move on. But, okay, almost. So, bottom line is that 72% of Americans think that global warming is happening, and 59% think that it's human caused. It's a consensus. We're good. Let's move on. Okay. And 66% of people, of voters, of U.S. citizens think that or are worried about global warming, which means that they don't necessarily think that it's in their control to solve it, but they're worried about it. And I like that this next part is addressed specifically towards elected officials, because there are no elected officials in this community. I'm going to move on though, because I need to hurry up. But I appreciate it. Okay. So this one I also thought was interesting. Only 18% of Americans think that environmental policies will reduce growth and jobs. So it's not true to say that most Republicans think that it won't do good for the economy. And that's the main thing that I went ahead and put in the description or in the title of this video, is that 85% of voters, that's 95% of Democrats and 71% of Republicans, support requiring utilities in their state to produce 100% electricity from clean, renewable sources by 2015. Mic drop. See, it's in here. I have to do it. Mic drop. But that's big, because it means that there is a lot of support behind moving towards renewable and clean energy. Now, I did notice that I do not think he is necessarily supportive of nuclear energy, but he might be a little biased because he's towards solar, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so now we are moving on to the last part of this section, which is talking about other Republican state folk that are currently alive that support environmental movements. And I'm just going to
move across them, but focus on Georgetown, Texas.
I agree. I was going to do that. So there's Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was very vocal about environmental things. Specifically, he was the only governor at that time who was pushing climate and clean energy legislation. And he's Republican. So he was ahead of the curve for sure.
Cap and trade program.
And a cap and trade program. He supported the cap and trade program. But he's Californian, right?
Yeah.
He's Hollywood.
Yeah.
Well, the next person is Mayor Dale Ross from Georgetown, Texas, also known as the second city in the U.S. to run 100% on nuclear or on renewable energy. Oh my goodness. The first city, for fun factoids, was Burlington, Vermont, to become 100% clean energy sourced. But yeah, Georgetown, Texas was the second one. And this is because this is because of market choice, honestly. Specifically, the Ross said, Rahul says, woohoo! Yes. Specifically, he says that no, environmental zealots have not taken over our city council, and we're not trying to make a statement about fracking or climate change. Our move to wind and solar is chiefly a business decision based on cost and price stability. Okay, Ross, sure. But, if he believes that way, fine. We still got to the same result. And that's another main part. Yes, Sandy.
He was a certified public accountant. He had his own accounting business. He was all about the money and the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had to make financial sense. And to him, it made financial sense, and they went there.
Exactly. Yeah. Natural power providers could only afford offer contracts that would lock in a price for 7 years. But the wind energy provider was able to guarantee low power costs for 20 years and solar for 25 years. Mm-hmm. So it just made more sense. It was more safe of an option to choose clean energy. Mm-hmm. Traditional power plants making steam from, and this is something I didn't think about. The reason why he did not go with the power plants that were in the area is traditional power plants making steam from burning fossil fuels can use large amounts of water each day. Our move towards renewable energy is a significant reduction on our total water use at Georgetown. So that was really interesting. I didn't think about the water use aspect of power plants as well. So that's something. Oh, sorry, those were fossil fuel power plants, not nuclear. Sorry. Okay, well, screw fossil fuel. Anyways, 100%, he said, quote, 100% renewable energy can help companies achieve sustainability goals at a competitive price without the burden of managing power supply contracts. So that's another thing too. Not only did it make sense economically for them to move towards clean energy, but it also brought in more tech industry and more business to that area because those industries, those businesses are being pushed by their consumers to move towards a less heavy footprint. And how do you do that? Well, you move your facilities to a location that uses 100% clean energy. And so they found that by doing that, by moving themselves towards 100% renewable energy, they were making themselves more profitable to businesses, or more likable, or more appealing to businesses to move over to that area, therefore further helping their economic standing. Like, cool. Probably job growth too. Okay, and then the other person who he talks about is Debbie Dooley, who was one of the founders of the Tea Party. And she's from Atlanta, Georgia. And she became a super big advocate for solar. And she ended up working with the Sierra Club, which is a very old environmental organization, to move for stronger solar policy in Georgia. And they ended up winning that, allowing for Georgians to use solar instead, which was cheaper. And they, I like this, they called their group together, the Sierra Club and Dooley. They were called the Green Tea Coalition. I love that. Nanda says, I'd love to see a more in-depth look at his plan, given that so many businesses simply won't try to make steps towards more environmentally friendly efforts if they aren't profitable. Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so you were referring to
the Texas guy,
Ross. Yeah, you were referring to Mayor Ross. Yeah, well, I think it wasn't so much within his plan as it was that businesses, because consumers were pulling more towards being environmentally friendly, if it's not immediately profitable. Right.
I think it was for him, really.
It was immediately profitable for Georgetown itself, and for the business sector, I mean, I don't think they think quite as short term as you're suggesting. I think they honestly do care a lot about what consumers think. And so if consumers are pushing more towards decreasing their environmental impact, or if more legislation makes it cheaper for them to survive if they have a lower environmental impact, then that would be appealing to them. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I should look further into it. And Mom is telling me to hurry up. So the last person I'm going to talk about, because the person after that was in my conservative climate change people exist, which if you're not seeing this live, I'm going to put it up there. So yeah, so go check out that for the last story, or get the book. Hey. But yeah, so Debbie Dooley and the Sierra Club worked together to not only change the energy sector's move in Georgia towards solar, but also move towards solar in Florida too. So that was cool. And that was a great example of a bipartisan effort, proving it exists. Yeah, solar empowers the consumer and the individual. And then we go on to talk about what I said earlier about the centralized energy sector, and the American Legislative Executive Council, which said that to promote legislation to penalize individual owners who use rooftop solar and label them as free riders to try to avoid people from moving more towards solar. So that's another example of misinformation. Dang it, Alec. The organization's thing is ALEC.
American Legislative Exchange Council.
ALEC. Bad ALEC. My dad's named Alex, so that's why it's funny. Yeah. So that's an example of misinformation. But overall, if there wasn't any misinformation, then it would be a very appealing proposition. And so they ended up moving more towards renewable energy, and I'm losing my train of thought and my voice. So any other main things?
One or two other things.
Okay.
Maybe how we frame matters on page 63.
Page 63. Okay, that'll be the second one, because I want to also say that there's a misconception that the government is funding renewable energy more, and that's not true. Also, historically, that definitely doesn't even out, because in 2016, fossil fuels received $20 billion of federal support, and renewables only received under $11 billion. So, if you include the indirect subsidies for coal, oil, and gas, they have received $649 billion of support in 2015 alone in the US. And to put that in perspective, that is 10 times the amount we spend on education. And a lot more than we spend on even US defense. So, okay. But Mom wants me to do...
That's a really good point, though.
Yeah. That just was like, dang.
Yeah.
Dang! We need to... And then that's where he further stresses about... So then, basically, moral of the story is that if you first connect with people on shared values, then you have to you have a receptive audience, and they will listen to you. But if you lead off with climate change itself, they're not going to pay attention. So that was duly basically expressing that it's more important to focus on the things that the group that you're talking to care about. If it has to do with more conservative folk, then they might care more about energy choice, energy freedom, and national security. Talking about how big businesses are also included in the conversation of environmental movements. Like, we have such a centralized and big business fossil fuel industry that is just kind of going overlooked for things like the big social media industries. And both should be tackled, but both should be tackled, you know? So if you want to have if you don't like monopolies, then you also should value renewable energy. Hope that made sense. Okay. All right. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is how we frame things matter, which is actually, I guess I was kind of already talking about that, wasn't I?
Yeah. That was a good...
Page 63. I'll pretend like that was on purpose. Okay. So basically, the same point is, it's not that all Republicans disregard science, but they all push back on what are perceived as liberal policies that will increase government control and decrease the choice on individuals and business. And that was seen a lot when the Green New Deal was presented. My favorite one here says, Sean Hannity at Fox News called it a government-forced veganism. I love that, because that's just so funny. And the cow farts, as was talked by Nate in the last discussion, right? You know, like that's one of the main arguments, right? So instead, Republican environmentalists argue that if Republican lawmakers can propose policy change solutions to solve climate change with conservative, free enterprise-based approaches, they won't be as easy to dismiss. And I think that's important. It needs to be a bipartisan issue. It needs to be something that both parties care about. It can't just be big business will solve it, right? And together they apparently made the Climate Solutions Caucus. And I need to look that up more. And that is where we're basically going to end it. Oh, and also young Republicans are doing a good job of changing the narrative of their party towards more environmental movements, which is amazing. And I talked about that a little bit in the Conservatives Exist thing. Yes, Mother?
Abraham Lincoln's party was the National Union Party.
I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
I don't know either. I have no
And
clue.
with that fun factoid, we're going to finish it off for today. He wasn't a Republican. He was just something. Rahul says that was an extreme comparison. Hilarious. What was? I'm sorry. I don't even remember. That was before. I'm glad it was funny. I'm going to go eat food now. Thank you so much for coming to the weekly climate book club meeting. The next meeting, we're going to read the next 2 chapters. We're just going to keep going with the 2 chapter things. So it'll be chapters 5 and 6. And we will not meet next week because next week is Christmas Eve. So we're going to meet the week after. Don't worry. I will let you know on all my social medias. By the way, if you are not on all my social medias, you should be. I will leave all the links in the description below. I know the people that are currently live streaming definitely are, but never know. What? Hi, Mom.
The following week is New Year's Eve.
You're joking.
No.
So it was great seeing you guys. We will see you back here in 2021. Okay, chapter 5 and 6 will be covered in 2021. Hey, thank you for catching that, Mom, because that's really funny. I will definitely make more videos on a lot of the topics that we cover throughout these chapters because there's so much, like, legit. I'm just putting a V by everyone I want to make a video for. So stay tuned for that. We will continue doing Monday videos probably every Monday because what else are we doing in this pandemic? Anyways, be safe. Have a good rest of your evening. Have a great holiday season and a happy new year. Don't make any resolutions that you're just not going to keep anyways. And I will see you all on Monday on the Beckisphere, where we will talk about the top 10 climate misconceptions that I have found that need to be addressed. All right. Talk to you on Monday. End stream. Bye.